Long before Sinai, before Moses, and before any law was written in stone, heaven already had an owner. In ancient Africa, the cosmos was ruled not by a solitary voice, but by a complex celestial throne, a court of gods and ancestors that organized the universe. Why has this divine structure, which sustained empires from the Nile to the western forests, been forgotten by today's great religions? But now, before we get into this video, just a quick reminder to subscribe and like below. This really helps us a lot in the algorithm and also helps you follow our videos. We've heard some comments from people saying they don't watch our videos because YouTube doesn't show them to them. When you sign up, we hope YouTube shows you all of our videos. Long before Moses received the tablets of the law, African cultures already contemplated an intricately ordered and interconnected cosmos. At the heart of these traditions was the concept of a heavenly throne, which not only symbolized power, but also served as the nucleus of a divine system. This throne was the point of convergence between heaven, earth, and ancestors, establishing a network of cosmic interactions that transcended human understanding at the time. The priests and griots, guardians of ancestral wisdom, preserved these traditions through stories, myths, and rituals that echoed for generations, keeping alive the vision of a universe where the spiritual and the material intertwined in a harmonious and balanced way. The truth is that this vision of a heavenly throne was not limited to a single authority figure, but to a divine council. In this council, gods, ancestral spirits, and cosmic guardians played specific roles, reflecting the diversity and complexity of the universe itself. Each element of nature was perceived as possessing a spiritual consciousness, and each region of the world was under the protection of a guardian entity. Such a structure not only recognized the power of the gods, but also celebrated the interdependence of all things. This created a unique dynamism where the balance between natural and spiritual forces was constantly maintained, ensuring the harmony of the cosmos. What few realize is that these beliefs were not confined to a specific region of Africa. They stretched from the banks of the Nile, where civilizations like Egypt flourished, to the dense forests of West Africa, inhabited by kingdoms like Benin and Ashanti. Despite cultural and linguistic differences, there was a central idea that permeated all of these societies: the existence of a divine throne that preceded the rise of monotheistic religions. This concept not only challenged the Western view of the divine, but also offered a rich and multifaceted perspective on the relationship between gods and mortals, nature and spirit. History reveals that these African spiritual traditions were later marginalized with the arrival of monotheistic religions and European colonization. However, its influences persist in contemporary belief systems, both within and outside Africa. The idea of a divine council, rather than a single absolute sovereign, continues to inspire new interpretations about the organization of the cosmos and the role of spiritual beings in human life. Current religious and cultural practices, which still venerate Oryxars, Vodans, and other entities, are living testimonies of this ancestral heritage. They remind us that, before biblical narratives dominated, there was a rich spiritual tapestry that connected the divine with the everyday, the sacred with the mundane. So the question is, how can these ancient African visions help us reimagine our relationship with the universe today? Reality shows that, at the heart of African cosmologies, the celestial throne was not just a symbol of power, but a reflection of the social and spiritual organization of the people of the continent. Instead of a single sovereign deity, the throne was occupied by a divine council, a set of spiritual entities that jointly governed the cosmos. This heavenly structure mirrored the earthly organization of many African kingdoms, where councils of elders and priests played crucial roles in community decisions. Thus, the divine model was intrinsically related to the way African societies understood governance and social interaction. What few realize is that the deities that made up this council had specific functions, reflecting essential aspects of life and the universe. Among them were gods linked to creation, who were responsible for shaping the world and living beings, war deities who protected communities in times of conflict, fertility deities who ensured the continuity of life, and entities of wisdom which guided mortals on their spiritual journeys. Some of these deities were so ancient that they were believed to have existed since the beginning of time, while others were ancestral spirits who, after great deeds, were elevated to divine status, reinforcing the idea that ancestors continued to influence the world of the living. The facts reveal that, unlike many religious traditions that place the gods on a distant and inaccessible plane, the deities of the African Council were seen as close and present. They manifested themselves in the forces of nature, in the rivers that provided water and life, in the mountains that offered protection, and in the natural cycles that governed agriculture and survival. The African heavenly throne, therefore, was not just an abstract concept, but a living presence that permeated every aspect of creation, interconnecting the spiritual with the material in a way that transcends traditional Western understanding. Historical records show that this conception of a divine council also finds parallels in other cultures around the world, but in Africa it acquired unique characteristics. The intimate interaction between gods and mortals, the personification of natural forces, and the centrality of ancestors are elements that shape a worldview deeply rooted in a respect for the interdependence of all things. This vision, which preceded the rise of monotheistic religions, subverted the notion of a single authoritative God, promoting an understanding of the universe as an intricate tapestry of interconnected energies and consciousnesses. Research shows that, despite the impacts of colonization and the imposition of foreign religious systems, these African spiritual traditions have not been completely erased. They continue to influence contemporary religious practices that still venerate Oryxars, Voduns, and other entities. This spiritual heritage remains alive and active, offering a powerful testimony to a cosmology that celebrates the diversity and interconnectedness of all life forms. The question that arises is, in an increasingly fragmented world, what can we learn from this ancient African divine advice about the importance of unity and harmony between all things? How is it possible that at the beginning of time, a heavenly throne was the point of convergence between the spiritual and physical worlds? African oral traditions tell that the heavenly throne was born along with the creation of the universe, established by a primordial deity who not only shaped reality as we know it, but also organized a complex system of spiritual governance. This deity, far from exercising tyrannical rule, created a cosmic order where different gods, each with their authority over essential elements such as time, water, fire, winds, and fertility, actively participated in the administration of the cosmos. It turns out that this governance structure was not a mere reflection of power, but rather a testament to a deeply balanced universe. Instead of a rigid vertical hierarchy, the heavenly throne symbolized a network of interdependent spiritual relationships. It was the heart of an intricate cosmic tapestry where decisions were made not by a single sovereign, but by consensus of deities, reflecting the complexity and interconnectedness of all things. This conception of divine governance was mirrored in African terrestrial societies, where the Council of Elders and community leaders guided decisions, ensuring that collective wisdom prevailed over individual desire. The facts reveal that the deities associated with this throne were not distant or inaccessible. They were a constant presence, manifesting themselves in the forces of nature, in the cycles of life, and in the daily practices of communities. Fire, for example, was not just a physical element, but an expression of a deity with which humans interacted directly. Thus, the heavenly throne was not only seen as a symbol of power, but as a living and active presence, permeating all aspects of existence and ensuring that the spiritual world was always in harmony with the material world. Analysis indicates that despite attempts at cultural and religious colonization, traditions associated with this heavenly throne have survived and continue to influence contemporary spiritual practices. The stories, myths, and rituals that celebrate this ancient conception of the cosmos are passed down from generation to generation, keeping alive a worldview that celebrates universal interdependence and harmony. The question that arises is, in an era dominated by ideologies of division and conflict, what can we learn from this African heavenly throne about the importance of building bridges between the spiritual and the material, between the divine and the human? Did you know that in many African traditions, the power of kings was seen as a direct extension of the heavenly throne. Kings were not only political leaders, but also spiritual figures who channeled divine order to the earth. This connection between the heavenly and the earthly was central to social and political organization in several African kingdoms. A ruler's authority depended not only on his ability to lead, but also on his ability to maintain harmony with spiritual forces. This reflected a worldview where the balance of the earthly realm was intrinsically linked to cosmic balance. Facts reveal that in cultures such as ancient Ethiopia and the West African kingdoms, the king was often considered an intermediary between the gods and the people. His coronation involved complex rituals that symbolized this divine connection. During these ceremonies, the king received not only the mantle of earthly power, but also the spiritual responsibility of protecting and guiding his people according to heavenly wills. The king's advisors, often made up of priests and spiritual leaders, played crucial roles in maintaining this connection. They were responsible for performing rituals and offerings to ensure that the gods continued to bless the kingdom. It turns out that this interconnection between the heavenly throne and governance practices was not exclusive to a single group. In Yoruba civilization, for example, the Orisa Zango, a god associated with thunder and justice, was revered as a divine king. His cult reflected the belief that justice and public order were manifestations of a heavenly power. Thus, rulers who followed Zango's principles were seen as fair leaders whose decisions were directly inspired by the gods. This created a system of governance where the spiritual and political were deeply intertwined, ensuring that human laws were always in alignment with the divine order of the universe. Evidence indicates that this conception of spiritual leadership was threatened with the arrival of colonial influences and monotheistic religions, which often disregarded the importance of the heavenly throne in African power structures. However, many communities have managed to preserve these traditions through cultural and religious practices that still honor this sacred connection today. Coronation rituals, ceremonial dances, and religious festivals continue to be moments in which the power of the heavenly throne is celebrated, reaffirming the connection between the world of gods and that of men. So the question that arises is, at a time when the divide between the spiritual and the political seems more pronounced than ever, how can we learn from these African traditions and reintegrate spirituality into leadership and governance? What makes the guardians of the African sky such enigmatic and revered figures in various traditions on the continent? In many African cultures, these guardians are seen as the bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, playing crucial roles in maintaining cosmic balance. In Yoruba cosmology, for example, there are the Orixas who, in addition to being deities, act as intermediaries between Olodumare, the supreme god, and humanity. They are responsible for ensuring that the divine will is fulfilled in the material realm, protecting sacred places and ensuring that harmony between men and nature is maintained. It turns out that these guardians are not mere religious abstractions. They are deeply rooted in the everyday life and rituals of African societies. The Dogons of Mali, for example, revere the Nomos, amphibious beings who, according to their traditions, descended from the sky to teach humans sacred knowledge, including astronomy and agriculture. The Nomos are considered guardians of the universe, protecting ancestral knowledge and ensuring that traditions and natural cycles are respected. This role of transmitting wisdom is a common element among many African guardians, who are seen as custodians of the secrets of the universe and spiritual guides for humanity. The facts reveal that, in several cultures, these guardians are also associated with the spirits of ancestors, deifications of individuals who in life demonstrated wisdom, courage, and justice. In the Ashanti Kingdom, for example, ancestors are revered as spiritual guardians, ensuring that social and spiritual order is maintained. They are invoked in rituals to protect the community and guide leaders in times of crisis. This connection between guardians and ancestors reinforces the idea that divine wisdom and protection are passed from generation to generation, ensuring spiritual continuity that transcends time. Reality shows that the role of the guardians of the African sky goes beyond simple protection. They are instructors and guides who teach humanity the moral laws and rituals necessary to live in balance with the universe. They are described in numerous narratives as beings of great power and knowledge, responsible for transmitting to humans practices that promote harmony with nature. In the Zulu tradition, for example, ancestors are consulted to guide agricultural practices and political decisions, ensuring that human actions are always in alignment with natural and spiritual forces. Evidence suggests that despite external influences that attempted to suppress these traditions, belief in the guardians of the African sky survived and continues to thrive, influencing contemporary spiritual practices. Communities around the continent still celebrate these beings through rituals and festivities that reaffirm the connection between the physical and spiritual worlds. This demonstrates a cultural and spiritual resilience that is a hallmark of African societies, where spirituality is not just an aspect of life, but a central element that defines collective and individual identity. So the question is, what can we learn from these guardians about preserving balance in an increasingly disconnected world? History reveals that African sacred knowledge associated with the heavenly throne was seen as a divine legacy transmitted through generations through the voices of elders and initiated masters. These wisdom keepers not only preserved traditions, but also acted as bridges between the spiritual and material worlds. In several African cultures, it was believed that the heavenly throne, more than a simple symbol of power, was the source of wisdom that could not be contained in written words, but rather lived and experienced. This wisdom was revealed in subtle and profound ways, through vivid dreams, complex rituals, and trance states that allowed initiates to access realms beyond ordinary perception. What few realize is that this transmission system did not depend on writing, but on collective memory, a living network of knowledge that flowed through time, ensured by orality and community experience. This oral tradition was not merely a way of preserving stories, but a method of profound teaching that engaged the senses, emotion, and spirit. Elders, often considered living libraries, were respected for their ability to retain and transmit stories and teachings with precision and depth. They were responsible not only for educating new generations, but for ensuring that sacred knowledge remained intact and powerful. It turns out that this knowledge was not static. Instead, it was dynamic and adaptive, evolving with the needs and challenges faced by the community. Rituals were adjusted, myths retold, and symbols reinterpreted to reflect the ever-changing realities experienced by the people. This flexibility allowed sacred knowledge to remain relevant and vital, a testament to the resilience and innovation of African spiritual traditions. Furthermore, trance states, achieved through practices such as dance, music, and the ritualistic use of herbs, were seen as essential tools for connecting with the divine and receiving direct instructions from ancestors and gods. Evidence indicates that, despite external pressures that sought to dismantle these traditions, sacred knowledge survived as a central element in African cultural and spiritual identity. Communities across the continent still honor their elders and teachers, holding ceremonies that celebrate ancestral wisdom and reaffirm the importance of orality as a living legacy. This system not only preserves history and culture, but also promotes a sense of continuity and belonging that is crucial to social cohesion. In a world increasingly dominated by writing and technology, the question that arises is, how can we integrate the depth and richness of African oral knowledge into our modern lives, keeping the lessons of the past alive while building the future? How has the vision of a single God transformed spirituality around the world? The arrival of monotheism, especially through biblical traditions, marked a profound break with ancient African cosmologies, which were largely polytheistic and centered on a divine council. Instead of multiple entities cooperating to govern the universe, monotheism presented a new narrative where one sovereign God held all power and authority. This view simplified spiritual complexity into a single line of divinity, radically altering the way people understood their relationship with the divine. The truth is that these new theological narratives have not only altered religion, but have also profoundly influenced culture and politics. Monotheism brought with it the idea of a universal morality, codified in sacred texts, which promised a sense of order and justice under the aegis of one God. Omnipotent. This contrasted with the African view of balance and interdependence between gods and mortals, where morality was often rooted in oral traditions and community practices. This change did not occur uniformly, but was driven by historical events, such as the rise of empires that adopted and spread these new beliefs, consolidating them into laws and culture. What few realize is that this transition was not only theological, but also strategic. The centralization of power in a single god reflected and reinforced the political centralization emerging in many states and empires. While the African Divine Council promoted the idea of collective distributed government, monotheism offered a unique leadership paradigm that could be easily adapted to growing monarchies and empires. This alignment between religion and politics helped to strengthen the authority of rulers, who saw themselves as representatives or chosen of this unique God on earth. Evidence indicates that, despite the imposition of these new monotheistic narratives, many elements of ancient African cosmologies managed to survive, especially in syncretic religious practices. For example, in Haiti and Brazil, Afro-diasporic religions such as Vodou and Candomblé maintain structures reminiscent of ancient divine councils, even while incorporating aspects of Christianity. This demonstrates the resilience of African traditions and their ability to adapt and resist new cultural and religious influences. While monotheism may have offered a clear and unifying vision of the divine, it also simplified the richness and complexity of spiritual interactions that African traditions celebrated. The question arises, what is the cost of suppressing spiritual diversity in the name of religious uniformity? And what can we gain by rediscovering and reintegrating these ancient African views into our contemporary understanding of the sacred? How is it possible that ancient spiritual traditions are relegated to the shadows by new religious beliefs? The encounter between African cosmologies and monotheistic religions was a process as complex as it was fascinating, marked by a constant tension between assimilation and resistance. In several regions, elements of African cosmologies were reinterpreted and, at times, integrated into the monotheistic doctrines that were spreading across the continent. This syncretism resulted in hybrid religious practices, where African gods found new meanings alongside Christian and Islamic figures. A notable example is the cult of the Oryxars, which in many African and diaspora contexts was associated with Catholic saints, creating a bridge between ancient African spirituality and the new dominant religion. The facts reveal that, while some traditions found ways to coexist, others were marginalized. Missionaries and colonizers often labeled African spiritual practices as superstitious or pagan, pressuring communities to abandon them in favor of supposed spiritual purification. This marginalization not only disregarded the depth and complexity of African cosmologies, but also attempted to rewrite the spiritual identity of entire peoples. In many communities, traditional ceremonies were banned, shrines destroyed, and spiritual leaders persecuted. This resulted in a cultural rupture that reverberated for generations, creating a divide between the spiritual past and present of many Africans. It turns out that despite these pressures, resistance was an inevitable response. Many African communities have found creative ways to preserve their traditions, even under the guise of new religions. The practice of religious syncretism became a survival strategy, where ancestral memory and ancient rituals were kept alive behind a facade of conformity. This phenomenon can be observed in several Afro-diasporic religions, such as Candomblé and Santeria, where African gods continue to be venerated under Christian guises. This syncretism not only preserved the essence of African cosmologies, but also enriched new religious traditions, creating a spiritual mosaic that reflects the resilience and adaptability of African cultures. Reality shows that this encounter between cosmologies was not a unidirectional process. Monotheistic religions were also influenced by African traditions. In many places, African spirituality brought a new dimension of mysticism and connection with nature to imported religions. The use of music, dance, and community celebrations, characteristic of African practices, were incorporated into Christian and Islamic worship, creating more vibrant and engaging religious experiences. This cultural and spiritual exchange continues to shape religious identity in many parts of Africa, where the lines between old and new, local and foreign, remain fluid and dynamic. Thus, the question that arises is, in a world in which religious identity is increasingly contested, what can ancient African cosmologies teach us about the strength of syncretism and the capacity for cultural adaptation? How did traditions as ancient and rich as those in Africa manage to survive centuries of cultural and religious repression? The answer lies in the resilience and ingenuity of African and diaspora peoples who have found ways to preserve their spiritual traditions through discreet but powerful ways. While colonization and the imposition of new religions attempted to erase these practices, the essential elements of ancient African traditions were kept alive through oral histories, secret rituals, and syncretic practices that wove a tapestry of cultural resistance. Despite all the oppression, African spirituality not only survived, but also adapted and evolved, consolidating itself as a vital source of identity and community cohesion. The truth is that orality played a crucial role in the continuation of these traditions. In societies where the written word was often inaccessible or devalued, the oral transmission of knowledge and stories became the backbone of cultural preservation. Griots and elders, authentic guardians of collective memory, passed stories, myths, and teachings from generation to generation, ensuring that the spiritual essence was not lost. These storytellers not only narrated past events, but also embedded moral and spiritual lessons within them, connecting listeners to their ancestral roots and strengthening their sense of identity and belonging. Evidence suggests that religious rituals, often carried out in secret, were another form of resistance. Even when practices were prohibited, communities found ways to come together and celebrate their spiritual traditions. Initiation ceremonies, sacred dances, and offerings to ancestors were carried out under the watchful eye of the elders, who ensured that every gesture and word was respected and preserved. These rituals were not only acts of devotion, but also moments of communal unity, where spirituality became a collective force against external oppression. What few realize is that, through syncretism, many African practices found new expressions that allowed them to survive under disguise. In the diaspora, particularly in regions such as the Caribbean and Latin America, African traditions have merged with Catholicism and other religions, creating hybrid belief systems such as Candomblé, Santeria, and Vodou. In these contexts, Orixás and Vodouns are often syncretized with Christian saints, allowing practitioners to maintain their traditions while adapting to new cultural and religious environments. This syncretism not only ensures the continuity of African practices, but also enriches religions with new dimensions of spirituality and meaning. Research shows that, despite all the transformations and challenges faced over the centuries, African spirituality continues to be a vibrant and vital force in the contemporary world. It can be seen in music, art, literature, and religious practices that celebrate the diversity and richness of ancient traditions. This continuity is a testament to the resilience and adaptability of African peoples, who have managed to keep alive a spiritual heritage that has not only resisted attempts at erasure, but has also become a source of cultural and spiritual renewal. The question that arises is, how do these traditions continue to teach us about the importance of cultural preservation and spiritual identity in an ever-changing world? What makes the African heavenly throne such a powerful and eternal symbol? This concept, anchored in the continent's ancient spiritual traditions, transcends simple metaphor to become a living expression of the interconnection between the sacred and the mundane. Unlike modern religious hierarchies that often centralize power in a single divine entity, the African celestial throne is a tapestry of complex spiritual relationships where gods, ancestors, and natural forces coexist in dynamic harmony. This spiritual balance reflects the way many African societies view the world, not as a series of isolated domains, but as a unified whole where every aspect of life is interconnected. It turns out that this concept not only shaped religious practices, but also influenced social and political structures. Many African kingdoms, such as Aksum and Benin, adopted systems of governance that mirrored this cosmic vision. Rulers were often seen not just as political leaders, but as spiritual figures who channeled divine order to their communities. This spiritual connection with the heavenly throne was reinforced by rituals and traditions that celebrated the interdependence between the human and the divine. The coronation of a king, for example, was an event loaded with symbolism, where the ruler was invested with the responsibility of maintaining balance between the physical and spiritual worlds. The facts reveal that this vision was not homogeneous, but varied according to local traditions. In Yoruba cosmology, the Orixas play the role of intermediaries, bringing the will of the supreme god, Olodumare, to earth. In a Khan tradition, ancestors are revered as spiritual guardians, ensuring social and spiritual order. These variations reflect the richness and diversity of African cosmologies, each offering a unique perspective on the universe and the human place in it. The heavenly throne, therefore, is not just a cultural artifact, but a testament to the spiritual diversity that existed long before the arrival of monotheistic religions. Studies indicate that the survival of this worldview to this day is a testament to the resilience and adaptability of African traditions. Despite the challenges posed by colonization and the imposition of new religions, many elements of these ancient cosmologies persist, both in Africa and in the diasporas. Contemporary religious practices such as Candomblé and Santeria keep the essence of the heavenly throne alive, adapting it to new contexts and challenges. This demonstrates not only cultural continuity, but also the ability of these traditions to offer relevant answers to modern questions. Reality shows that the African heavenly throne is not just a symbol of the past, but a living reminder that there are multiple ways of understanding the divine and the cosmos. In an increasingly fragmented and polarized world, these ancient views offer valuable lessons about the importance of unity and harmony. The question is, how can these traditions inspire us to create a future where the interdependence between humanity, nature, and divinity is celebrated and preserved?